Yeah, so CBT-I, or Cognitive Behavioural Therapy for Insomnia, it is considered the gold standard for chronic insomnia, and that's recommended as a first-line treatment by the peak medical and professional bodies before people try medication. Essentially, it works by breaking the cycle of sleeplessness through a range of practical strategies that really retrains the mind and the body for healthier sleep.
Hello and welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Australia. I'm Zoe Mernier, the editor of Prevention, and it's great to have you join us again at the podcast that helps you navigate midlife with knowledge, confidence, and hopefully a bit more ease. One of the biggest challenges many women face during perimenopause and menopause is sleep. Maybe you're lying awake at 3 a.m. with a racing mind, or being woken up by hot flushes and finding it impossible to drift back off. Poor sleep doesn't just leave us feeling tired, it can affect our mood, our mental health, and our ability to cope with daily life, as I'm sure many of you know. Today, I'm joined by Dr Giselle Withers, a clinical psychologist and founder of A Mindful Way. Giselle specialises in helping people improve sleep through cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, known as CBT-I, and mindfulness practices. She's here to share why sleep can be so disrupted at this stage of life, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Giselle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Zoe.
Okay, so as I mentioned, sleep problems are one of the most common complaints during perimenopause and menopause. From your perspective, what's going on in the body and mind at this stage that just makes sleep so tricky?
Yeah, and sleep problems, sleep difficulties are extremely common during perimenopause. So it's affecting about between 40 to 50%, 56% of women.
Right.
Research shows that the data is actually, the prevalence is actually higher than that. But we're looking at about half of women at this life stage experiencing disturbed sleep. And there are many reasons behind these challenges, ranging from physical to psychological factors. And one of the most significant and the most obvious driver is the hormonal changes happening at this time. And I'll come back to that in a moment, because there are a number of other causes of sleep disturbances at this life stage. Another important one is the mood change or mood changes and the higher rates of depression and anxiety, of which insomnia is a common symptom of those. Aging is another common factor. So unfortunately, our sleep does tend to become more fragmented as we age, not something we can avoid. Then there's something called nocturia, which is the more frequent urge to go to the toilet. So there are many reasons for this, but one of the key ones being that falling estrogen level can weaken the tissues around the urogenital area, and that causes some bladder capacity problems. And this can contribute to an overactive bladder and more frequent need to go to the toilet at night time. Then we've got the lifestyle and stress factors, which I'll talk a lot more about, I think, today. And we also can have development of a number of different clinical sleep disorders as well. So restless legs syndrome, sleep disordered breathing like sleep apnea, and this all can begin for many women around menopause. There's a number of medical conditions, so thyroid, chronic pain problems, heart conditions, neurological, certain medications can cause it. And then the vasomotor symptoms, so the hot flushes and night sweats, which affects many women at this time. So when you hear a list like that, it's surprising that sleep disturbance is one of the most common symptoms of perimenopause. So I'm happy to talk to some of those hormonal changes.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest changes that we all know happens at this time of life are those hormonal changes, with the biggest shift being that erratic change in estrogen and that slow decline of progesterone occurring as we leave our reproductive years. We often think of estrogen and progesterone as just our reproductive hormones, but, I'm not sure many of your listeners now know that those hormones are used right across the body. And those hormones do influence many of the physiological processes that regulate our sleep. So they act on part of the brain that runs our circadian rhythm, and that's our internal 24-hour clock that tells us when to feel sleepy and when to feel alert. And so lower estrogen can weaken these circadian systems and affect that. And linked to this is the effect on the body temperature regulations. So that's also run by our circadian system, and that's making our brains more sensitive to heat changes. And during the night, instead of us being able to maintain a stable low body temperature, women can experience this surge of heat that can interrupt the normal cooling that we need for deeper sleep. So these hot flashes and night sweats can really wake us up several times in a night. So estrogen and progesterone interact with all these other key hormones that regulate sleep, like melatonin, which helps us to fall asleep, and cortisol, which is our stress and wake-up hormone, and adrenaline, which drives up the fight-flight response. So when all these hormones are fluctuating in perimenopause, sleep does become lighter, more fragile, and more easily disrupted. So yeah, that's the kind of physical part, and then we've got the sort of psychological and emotional factors that can influence affect sleep as well. So again, all your listeners will know midlife is an incredibly demanding life stage. Many women are juggling have multiple roles. We're parenting, working, many of us working, supporting perhaps aging parents, trying to maintain relationships. They might be going through some marital difficulties or separation or career changes, all the while adjusting to major health and identity shifts happening in perimenopause. And this chronic stress that women are often under creates what we call hyperarousal. So this is when the nervous system is really operating in overdrive. So we've got more muscle tension and elevated heart rate and elevated breathing rate, the body temperature changes, and this makes it very difficult to wind down at night. So women can go to bed feeling really tired, but actually quite wired. So they might get off sleep and, might experience 3 or 4 hours of sleep and then find they wake up at 3 a.m. And it's very easy at this time for the mind to start racing, planning, kind of problem solving, and this cognitive arousal can persist then throughout the night, making it very difficult to get back to sleep. So when you put all of these factors together, those hormones, the hot flashes, any medical issues, mood issues, blood pressure, and busy 3 a.m. mind, you do get the perfect storm for poor sleep.
Absolutely.
And insomnia.
I mean, it's almost cruel, isn't it, how tired we can feel through the day and then how absolutely alert we can be at 3 a.m.
Oh, well, it is just so frustrating, isn't it?
Now, how does disrupted sleep during menopause affect mental health, daily functioning and quality of life? Because we've got all this going on at the same time, but then how does, really poor quality sleep just then add to the mix?
Yeah, well, poor sleep doesn't just make you tired in the day, it really impacts on mood regulation and our memory and our concentration and our resilience and our energy throughout the day. It affects relationships. We can get more irritable and perhaps less patient with people. It can affect our work performance and output and really our overall sense of well-being. So poor sleep absolutely affects daily functioning and quality of life and affects our mental health. And sadly, poor sleep can actually amplify the menopause symptoms. So with menopause symptoms, we're already experiencing some brain fog or memory problems or fatigue and body pain. And poor sleep can really amplify those and exacerbate them. So that really makes it harder. And look, the scientific data is quite sobering in the sense that the rates of depression and anxiety and sleep disturbances and even suicide rates are the highest for women in their 40s and 50s. And this tells us that really women need far more support at this age. So when you're already stretched between the work demands, parenting, caring for family, trying to maintain your own health, sleep isn't a luxury. It's essential. And without it, everything feels a lot harder. And the pressure to get good sleep, ironically, can make insomnia worse. The stakes are high. So helping women to sleep better is really one of the most important ways that we can protect women's mental health and their physical health and their quality of life.
For sure. Now, because you mentioned things like, anxiety that becomes so much more prevalent at this time, is there actually a link between poor sleep and heightened anxiety or mood swings? Like, is it, it's one of those, which is first, the chicken or the egg? Is the sleep
Yes.
causing it, or is the anxiety causing, or is it just a big vicious cycle?
Yeah, well, the relationship is bidirectional. So that means it is a two-way street, that one will affect the other and vice versa. So, stress and anxiety will fragment sleep and make, create insomnia, and then poor sleep makes us more sensitive and irritable and prone to mood swings and more hyper-aroused too, which can trigger anxiety. So when this becomes a pattern, it can tip people into a clinical anxiety or depression, or worsen pre-existing conditions. And it can happen at any age. So but it seems to be magnified in perimenopause and postmenopause because of those sheer demands of midlife, that add that, and the extra layer of the hormonal changes. So yes, sleep and mental health are deeply connected and both need to be addressed. So when I see people in my private practice with sleep problems, I don't really separate them from mental health. I'm often treating the co-occurring anxiety, depression, and insomnia.
Right.
But the good news is that when you do have improvements in one, you will have improvements of the other. So when people start sleeping better, their mood and resilience will often improve dramatically as well.
A very good incentive indeed. Now, you're the founder of A Mindful Way, which is a website and program that employs mindfulness and cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia. So for those who may not know, can you explain what CBT-I is and why it's considered the gold standard treatment for insomnia?
Yeah, so CBT-I, or Cognitive Behavioural Therapy for Insomnia, it is considered the gold standard for chronic insomnia, and that's recommended as a first-line treatment by the peak medical and professional bodies, including the Royal Australian College for General Practitioners, the Australasian Sleep Association, the Australian Psychological Society, and the Australian and British Menopause Society. So all the peak bodies recommend CBT-I as a first-line treatment. So before people try medication. And I personally combine CBT-I with mindfulness training because I find the combination to be the most effective approach with my clients. So I'll talk a bit about CBT-I first, and then I can talk a bit more about mindfulness later. Essentially, it works by breaking the cycle of sleeplessness through a range of practical strategies that really retrains the mind and the body for healthier sleep. So this is addressing unhelpful thoughts about sleep, changing and resettling sleep patterns so they're more consistent, and reducing behaviours that tend to keep the brain too awake or wired at night time. So this combined with principles of mindfulness, and that's about building an attitude of acceptance and non-judgment, so not judging being awake, non-striving, which is not really making sleep a goal and striving towards it, which creates more pressure on sleep and can make the anxiety worse. So we're teaching people non-striving and trusting. So that's about really trusting that sleep will come eventually, or you'll trust that you'll get the sleep that you need across the week. So it's not something we have to control or force. And that's part of letting go. So it's really letting go of this, constant striving for sleep. And we add into that self-compassion, really looking after ourselves at night when we're struggling, without the blame and the frustration and the anger towards yourself, perhaps, for not being able to sleep. And this really shifts the dial away from anxiety about sleep to a much calmer and wiser approach to sleep time. So I've given you that combination of CBT-I and mindfulness together there. So I can tell you a little bit about CBT-I. A lot of people do come into therapy having done sleep hygiene and feel like they've done CBT-I, and they've said, I've tried all the sleep tips, it's not working. CBT-I doesn't work. And really, they've only attempted one component of CBT-I. There are 5 core pillars of CBT-I. So sleep hygiene is important, but on its own, it won't fix chronic insomnia. And that's because insomnia is about being caught in a vicious cycle. So your mind is often trying to override the natural sleep processes. And then worrying about sleep and trying hard to sleep creates more stress. And we also then can develop a conditioned arousal. So the brain has learnt that being in bed means I'm awake, and often awake in a highly stressed state. So this CBT-I combined with mindfulness tackles that directly, and it will, there are things like it will get you out of bed if you've been awake too long. It anchors you to a consistent wake up time. It shifts those anxious thoughts that fuel that cycle, and it does help you to trust that sleep will come naturally. So I can talk about those 5 pillars if that would be helpful.
Yes, definitely.
So that you have an overview of what CBT-I is. So it's a structured program. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And it really, you could say, resets the sleep system. So the first pillar, and these are in no particular order, but a key pillar that we might start with or alongside another one is called stimulus control. And it really works on reconditioning the mind and the body to feel sleepy in bed again. So when we retrain the brain, we're really trying to help it associate bed being a place where we rest and sleep, and it's okay for sexual pleasure in bed, but we're really removing any other forms of mental stimulation, whether it be watching TV or scrolling on the phone, arguing or discussing life matters with your partner, doing that life admin on the phone. All of these things really need to happen outside of the bedroom. So if you're awake in bed worrying, we also encourage people to take that worry out of the bed and then resettle yourself in the lounge room until you feel sleepy enough to return back to bed. So that's the idea of stimulus control. The second pillar is called sleep consolidation. It's also sometimes called bedtime restriction or sleep scheduling. And this is about adjusting the sleep window. And this is about your time in bed. So the time you go to bed and the time that you get up. So then we're trying to build up a natural sleep pressure, making it much easier to fall asleep and stay asleep within that sleep window. And as your sleep is more consolidated in that window, so you're sleeping at least 85% of that time, and we call this sleep efficiency, then we slowly open that window. And it might be we just open it by 15 minutes over a few nights, and then again until you reach a sleep length that works for you. So for some people, this might be 6 hours, and that's sufficient. For others, you might work towards 7 hours or 8. We really do all have different sleep needs. But when that sleep efficiency starts dropping again, it's a sign that we've perhaps opened that window too far.
Right.
We might come back. So the third pillar is developing our cognitive strategies, and this is reframing unhelpful thoughts and worries about sleep. So thoughts like, I must get 8 hours of sleep tonight, or I'm not going to function tomorrow, can be changed to, if I don't sleep well tonight, I'll manage tomorrow as I always have. I'll sleep better tomorrow night or the next, and I trust I'll get the sleep I need across the week. So the fourth one is relaxation training. And this is learning to calm and settle the mind. And this might be using breathing strategies or visualization practices. And the fifth one is really the sleep hygiene. So that's what we were talking about before, about just common sense approach to sleep. So really removing anything that clearly interferes with sleep, like drinking too much coffee during the day or having alcohol at night to wind down, but it really interferes with sleep. Creating a nice and quiet environment conducive to sleep.
The cool bedroom, we've heard that one as well. 18 degrees, right?
Cool bedroom. That's right, but not being too rigid about these things. Sometimes people can get very fixed on having the temperature right. And actually, a lot of the work I do is helping people become a bit more relaxed around and not having too many rules, not being too rigid around having to get it right, so to speak. So sometimes sleep hygiene can make the anxiety worse for people who are trying to apply that too rigidly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, the beauty of learning CBT-I is once you learn all of these skills, they do stay with you. You have them for life, so you're not reliant on a sleeping pill. So it is very empowering to learn these skills.
And so, yes, so you obviously, as you say, you work with mindfulness alongside CBT-I. So how does mindfulness just add that extra sort of layer, and how do you incorporate it within the CBT-I training?
Yeah, so I've alluded to that a bit before, that mindfulness is really about a different approach to sleep. So it involves training our attention to stay present and accepting our experiences without judgment. So there is really good research to show that mindfulness-based programs can significantly improve sleep, and it can be combined with CBT-I beautifully, which is what I offer in my online program, the Mindful Way to Healthy Sleep program. And how it helps is it just helps in so many ways, but to give you a few, it helps us cope with those sleepless nights. So when you can't fall asleep, it really offers us a way to stay calm and avoid frustration. And that's with the principles I talked about before, acceptance and non-judging and non-striving and trust, but also just by learning how to focus your attention on your breath and those physical sensations like the softness of the mattress, and the comfort of the pillow, the weight of the doona, and just focusing on those flowing sensations of breath. And this really can help shift your attention away from those anxious thoughts, like, I must sleep now, and much more to a place where we're learning acceptance and non-striving. So instead of battling with sleep, we're learning how to let go of this struggle and trust that sleep will come when our body is ready. That piece, it really helps reduce hyperarousal. So it's about practicing mindfulness throughout the day to reduce that chronic stress that builds up over the day. And when we can go to bed and we're in less of that very chronically stressed, hyperaroused state, we're much more likely to be able to fall asleep at night time.
So it's not about this is what we do when we've woken up at 3 a.m. and we're wide awake. It's about doing it all through the day. So how do you sort of suggest people work it into their daily routine?
So there are formal practices of mindfulness, and there are what we call informal practices of mindfulness. So formal is what we all know as a meditation practice. And that would be, when people start out, it's really useful to have a guided recording, and really just could start at 5 minutes a day and build that up to 10 to 20. And you might get to a point where you could do a half an hour practice. When people are time poor, though, that's really difficult. So the informal practices are really useful. And that can be when we choose any activity that we do in the day and bring awareness and mindfulness to that activity. So that might be something as simple as when you're having that shower in the morning, really use that as an opportunity to be completely present for it. There are so many great sensations like the hot water on your back, the sounds of the water dripping down. If you're using soap, the scent of the soap. There's lots of things to focus on. Most of the time, we're not really in the shower, are we? We're thinking about the day. We're thinking ahead. We're not very present. So if we can just learn to bring awareness to those moments, we're really shifting out of that busy mind and the doing mode into just being very present. And that's one example. And there are lots of examples in the day where you can do things like that. Brushing your teeth, washing some dishes in the kitchen sink, just really being present. Hanging out the washing, it might be something that we are always just in our minds thinking, but can we just bring our attention to what we're doing in those moments?
Yeah. Try not to do it on autopilot and really just take it in as we're doing it.
Right, yeah.
Now, can mindfulness actually also help with the hot flushes and night sweats that can disturb sleep for so many women?
It really can, absolutely can. So mindfulness won't stop a hot flush, but it will help us change our response to it. So instead of that emotional reaction, perhaps it's panic, like, oh no, here it comes again, particularly if it's nighttime, like, I'm not going to get back to sleep now. Then mindfulness will just help us ride that wave and ride the hot flush with just a kind of calm awareness of what's happening. So we don't have to like the sensation, but we can practice just accepting that it's here and that it will pass. And that really makes it much easier to settle ourselves afterwards. And there's good research evidence that mindfulness can help women cope with hot flushes and night sweats. And so there is a clinical trial. Professor James Carmody found that I think researched 110 women, found people who learned mindfulness over 8 weeks reported feeling much less bothered by hot flushes. And they also had then greater improvements in their sleep. And that was compared to a waitlist control.
Wow.
And there's been other studies that show that people with higher mindfulness skills actually have fewer menopause symptoms, perhaps because they're not reporting them as just distressing. They're coping better with those symptoms.
So for women out there who are just really feeling desperate after months of poor sleep, what would be the very first step that you would recommend?
Okay, the very first step is knowing that you're not alone. I think help is available. So that's, it's important to know that. I would say see your GP and make sure they have a specialist up to date with managing menopause. And the Australasian Menopause Society has a list of members that you can search for a doctor by your suburb. So really talk to your doctor about sleep. I would also talk about the other potential for sleep disorders. So perhaps have a screening for sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, talk about mood issues, anxiety, depression, any other medical issues, and ask specifically about a CBT-I or mindfulness program, whether you can be referred to a psychologist. It might be that you may need a referral to a sleep doctor, is also could be important, or a reputable digital CBT-I program if you'd like to start with some self-help approach. The Sleep Health Foundation has a fact sheet on menopause and sleep, so people could go to that sheet. There's also lots of resources on my website for perimenopausal and sleep issues, and I have some online programs there for women, specifically for women with sleep issues, that people could reach out to have a look at. So that's really a good start.
Absolutely. There's plenty that we can do that is proactive, that will actually help us, instead of just waiting for the night and hoping that it will magically improve. Finally, what's the most hopeful message you'd like women in midlife to hear about improving their sleep?
So my most hopeful message for women is that whilst poor sleep in perimenopause is common, you can overcome insomnia and sleep well again. So sleep should be seen as a health priority. It does protect mood and cognition and relationships, and we have effective solutions. So CBT-I, mindfulness, hormone replacement therapy can be useful, other non-hormone options. So I've seen women go from years of exhaustion to feeling energized again and feeling like themselves again with good sleep. So that possibility is real and it's accessible for people.
That is very, very good news for a lot of our readers, I'm sure. Well, that's all we have time for today. Giselle, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much again for having me and the opportunity to talk about this topic.
It's a big one and a very important one, and I think we got, so much from that. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit A Mindful Way, Giselle's program, on her website for resources and programs tailored to sleep and well-being. That will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Thriving in Menopause. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And for more advice on living your best life at midlife, be sure to pick up a copy of Prevention magazine. I'm Zoe Mernier. See you next time.